Hey folks, Ken Hovind here and the crew at Dinosaur Adventureland. It is August 31st, 2025. This is our next to the last session of boot camp. I get asked the question quite often, who built the pyramids? Who built the Great Pyramid? I cover my answer on video number 7. I'm curious to hear what our guest says. There are a lot of pyramids around this world. Why? What is this all about? Brother, come tell us about who built these things anyway. Come on up here. Thank you for coming, brother, all the way.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hey, so, welcome everybody, and thank you once again for having me. Again, my name is Kevin House. Again, we're from Boot Hill Bible Ministries out of Missouri. And yesterday I gave a little bit of my testimony, but figured I need to do one thing that I forgot to do. Hi, Dad. So there you go. So just real quick to let you know a little bit more about myself and everything, some of my credentials. I have 2 bachelor's degrees out of the Bible. One of them is from Liberty University, and the second one is from West Tennessee Bible Institute. And I just recently received my master's degree from the University of Wales, Trinity St. David, in ancient religions. So, and I was heavily influenced with archaeology within that master's study, and hoping to go back for my doctorate within another year or so. Also, for those that are present, I forgot to mention yesterday that we do have some free materials up here, so some booklets and tracts my wife wrote, and some pens and stuff, so feel free to grab as much of it you want to and pass them around to others as well. You know, we're just trying to get the Lord's work out there. So the second topic that we have today is pyramids around the world, a continuation of Babel. So within the Bible, there are several events that will shape the history of mankind. So there are a lot of major historical Bible events that are within God's Word. They either have or will shape history. So the first major event, of course, we see is creation. We end up seeing the creation of the world through God's Word. We also have the flood, which changed, the creation and how the world looks. Of course, probably the most significant thing that ends up changing the world would be the crucifixion and resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ. So that dramatically changed things for all of us. And again, in the future as well, second coming and stuff. But if we revert backwards again, though, another major one that most people tend to not really understand or to look at a lot would be the Tower of Babel, or Babel, depending on how you want to pronounce it. While a lot of these other accounts in the Bible give us a good amount of detail, this major historical event is only covered in roughly 9 verses. The Tower of Babel only has really 9 verses in it, which is, for something that's so major, it's just given basically a footnote within God's Word. But let's see what the Bible says about the Tower of Babel in Genesis 11. So, and the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, "Go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, "Go to, let us build us a city and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven. And let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, "Behold, the people is one, and they all have all one language. And this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. So that's pretty much all we get with the Tower of Babel. The people started to construct and build a tower and a city. They're trying to unite all of mankind after the flood. Remember, God told Noah and his people to scatter abroad and populate the earth, replenish the earth, fill it. But they were disobeying God in that process by wanting to stay unified and staying right on top of each other and together and not spreading out. So because they disobeyed the Lord, again, their language was confused, and several languages ended up emerging through this. So even though we don't get a lot of direct detail in this account for the Tower of Babel, we do get some side details found in other parts of the Bible. In Genesis chapter 10, this is considered to be the Table of Nations, and it shows the 70 nations that spread out after the incident. I believe today that linguists have actually traced all the languages down to about 94, 96 core languages, which is not 70, but it's still a long cry for the thousands that people speak today, breaking it down into core languages. And there might have been some languages that, we've lost over time that could end up connecting others and dwindling that number back down to 70. But within this, we get a mention of Babel and its founder once again in Genesis 10. So looking at Genesis 10, 8 through 12. And Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. Out of that land went forth Asher, and builded Nineveh, and the city of Rehoboth, and Calah, and Rezin. Within Nineveh and Calah, the same as a great city. Or between Nineveh and Calah, the same as a great city. So here we end up seeing a little bit about Nimrod. And we find out some things about Nimrod. So we find that Nimrod's the one who founded the city of Babel and other cities as well. Through this account and others, we also find out that Nimrod was actually the first emperor within history. He's the first conqueror within the history of mankind. The name Nimrod was not even his real name. The name Nimrod actually translates into rebel. So he was a rebel against God. We don't know what his real name was, but the name Nimrod ends up giving us some idea about who he was as a person, again, being a rebel. He also persuaded everyone to follow him. He was able to convince people to follow him instead of God. We do end up knowing that. And we also see that Josephus and the Talmud end up saying that Nimrod made an affront against God, that what he was doing was basically flying in the face of God and trying to rebel against God. And they both also state that he is the one who commissioned the building of the Tower of Babel. Now, the term mighty hunter before the Lord, a lot of people say, well, that sounds like a really good thing. But based off all the information we have, it was not. What was he hunting? Well, he was most likely hunting people. Not to kill them, but to round them up under his empire and bring them under his rule. And again, we see that through some of the early Jewish texts and commentaries of Nimrod's life, that he basically enslaved people, brought them in, and some went willingly, others he probably went through violence in order to gain control over them. So we learn more of Nimrod in a few other verses of the Bible. 1 Chronicles 1:10 states, and Cush begat Nimrod, he began to be mighty upon the earth. And this pretty much echoes and simplifies the Genesis account. And then the last one we have mention of Nimrod is in Micah. Nimrod's only mentioned a few times, but Micah 5:6 states, and they shall waste the land of Assyria with the sword, and the land of Nimrod in the entrances thereof. Thus shall he deliver us from the Assyrian, when he cometh into our land, and when he treadeth within our borders. So what does this tell us? That Assyria is actually equated with the land of Nimrod. Even though it's north of Shinar or Mesopotamia, Syria is a little bit further north than that. But it tells us that Nimrod had power there as well. And that when Asher went to build those cities, of Assyria being one of them, that he probably did so under Nimrod's commission. And he was probably like a prime minister or second in command to Nimrod, Asher was. So the crazy thing about Babel is that once God ended up confusing the languages, people started to babble, and they continued to babble on and babble on and babble on and babble on and everything. The Hebrew word for Babylon is Babel or Babel. And so Babylon and Babel or Babel, again, are the two of the same thing. They're both the same place. The Bible has a lot to say about Babylon. But one key instance here that we want to look at is in Revelation 17:5. It says, upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. So this is talking about, of course, the great whore of Revelation. Then, again, has Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Why does God give this whore the name of Babylon and say that it's the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth? Well, that's because all of the paganism, all the evil, all the rebellion against God pretty much came out of Babylon. It is my firm belief that when God ends up separating everybody at Babel, when Nimrod was having everybody build the Tower of Babel, that he was actually creating his own religion around himself and made himself a god, and ends up making the tower as a place of worship. And not only deifying himself, but also deifying the stars, the moon, the sun, and a lot of other features. And then what happens? After the Tower of Babel, everybody's language is confused. They start spreading out. What do? They take that with them, and they all end up worshiping and making different ideas of the same thing. Because where did all paganism come from? Where did all these false religions go? We start with Genesis 1. There's just God, 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 all the way through the flood. God. Then by the time we get to Abraham, we start seeing false gods. Where do they come in? The Tower of Babel is really the only place where it would actually fit. So again, Babylon is the place where all these abominations began. And that's why everything can be traced right back to it. And so the pyramids that we see around the world are a continuation of the Tower of Babel. Now, the Tower of Babel, most people, when you think of the Tower of Babel, you think of this right here, where you end up seeing this column-shaped thing rise up to the sky and everything that the medieval people ended up creating and designing. But unfortunately for everybody, that is not what the Tower of Babel would have looked like. It is nowhere close. Again, that was just what the medieval, I got to get it out in a moment, the medieval people ended up imagining in Europe. The Tower of Babel would have actually been more of the design of a Middle Eastern ziggurat, which is more like a stepped pyramid that ends up rising high above the plain. So that would end up being more of what the Tower of Babel would have looked like. And again, each city in the Middle East had its own ziggurat for each individual god. One of the most notable and complete that we have today is the ziggurat of Ur. Ur, of course, being the home of Abraham, right? He was from the Ur of the Chaldees. And so we see this ziggurat here. It's partially reconstructed. It was actually reconstructed during the 1980s by Saddam Hussein's regime. That's one thing Saddam did that was actually halfway good. He helped reconstruct this. Why? So we can end up seeing it a little bit better, and we can investigate it more and learn more about it. But so we have the ziggurat of Ur, but we also have enough document evidence to reconstruct the ziggurat of Babylon at its height. At the height of the ziggurat of Ur, you would end up seeing that small one there. The ziggurat of Babylon at the height under Nabonidus, right before the fall of Babylon, that's how big the ziggurat would have ended up being. Of course, the Tower of Babel built by Nimrod would have ended up being a little bit smaller, quite a bit smaller. I thought it was supposed to reach unto the heavens, be so tall. Well, if you've never had a building that's very high, how high would you have to make it in order to feel like you're reaching the sky? Anybody know how high a skyscraper was 150 years ago? 3 to 4 stories. That was a skyscraper. You don't know why? Because the building material they had to use was wood. They couldn't go very high with wood. It'd get too unstable, and it would end up, wind blows hard enough, it would fall down and crash. Only whenever we got steel beams were we able to go higher and make things better and stronger and higher buildings. So you don't actually have to go, a mile high like what they have that one building in Dubai that's the tallest building in the world now to feel like you're reaching the heavens. You just have to be higher than everything else. So while the Tower of Babel, again, might not have been very high, it was the highest thing that they were building. Probably, I would say, anywhere from 20 to 30 meters tall, which is still pretty tall. All right? That's pretty good height there. But one thing that we end up finding all around the world that a lot of people are intrigued by, but no one can fully really explain, is that fact that there are pyramids literally located all over this planet. We find pyramids all over the place, and places you would not even really understand. Even modern constructions, we end up still sticking to a pyramidal shape in a lot of different things, especially when they deal with sacred items and stuff as well. So, of course, everybody knows about the pyramids of Egypt, right? Giza. Everybody has seen those. That's what everybody tends to want to focus on quite a bit. They are wonderful. Did you know that just south of them in Sudan, that there are more pyramids there than there are in Egypt? From the Nubian kingdom that was just below Egypt, they built more pyramids than the Egyptians. They just were not as big. I guess if you make smaller pyramids, you can make more of them, right? And so it ends up allowing for that. But we also find tons of pyramids in Central America. This is Chichen Itza in the Yucatan of Mexico. And it's a very interesting site. I hope one day I get to go see because it is wonderful. But one of the biggest pyramids that would have been constructed in the Western Hemisphere was actually in Peru. This is what remains of it, but there was a very large pyramid. And in fact, if they were able to reconstruct it, it'd be taller than the Great Pyramid of Giza. It was a huge pyramid at one time in Peru. Here in the United States, if you go up to close to where I'm from, it's right across the river of St. Louis to Cahokia Mounds in Illinois. You have Monk's Mound. A lot of Native Americans here in North America made Indian mounds. Well, what's a mound? It's a high-rise, right? And it would be a way to have built a pyramidal type structure using what you have around you. If you don't have stone, can't make bricks because you don't have the right kind of material for that, what would you do? Just pile up dirt, right, and build a mound. Same thing there. But there's also pyramids in China. There are all kinds of pyramids in China. The only problem is the Chinese government won't let anybody go in there to investigate them because China. So go figure that one. But you also have pyramids in Indonesia. This is the Gunung Padang in Java. And it's considered by some to possibly be one of the oldest pyramids on Earth. But again, that's using secular time scales and everything. And we know about their dating methods and how inaccurate those can end up being. We also have the Nimrut Dağ in Turkey. And this was actually a mountain that the people ended up taking and chiseled away to give this pyramidal type structure to it. So they actually ended up going through and made it and shaped it into this. But it was an actual mountain that they changed it themselves. We even find what appears to be partial pyramids in Greece. There's a pyramid that the Romans built in the middle of Rome. Today, there's a pyramid in Memphis, Tennessee that you can buy fishing tackle out of. There's a pyramid in front of the Louvre in Paris. You have all sorts of Buddhist monasteries all over Central Asia, Southern Asia, and Indonesia and stuff that are pyramidal in shape. Why is this design all over the place? Why are we seeing this everywhere? Well, I believe, and a lot of archaeologists tend to believe, that pyramids are actually what a lot of people would consider constructed mountains. That they're actually a human attempt to build a mountain and make it sacred. They are both similar in fashion. Again, pyramids are all, if you take a pyramid and a mountain, put them side by side, don't they look pretty similar to each other? To a mountain peak? Yeah, so again, they share similar shape, features to mountains and pyramids. But they also have a few different ideas that make them sacred to a lot of the pagan and non-Judeo-Christian beliefs. So a lot of these pyramids or mountains tend to be considered what is known as an axis mundi, which means the center of the world. So the axis mundi of a civilization is basically a point where they believe was the creation of all things within that society. In their myths and legends, that would be where the gods would have created everything, and it would connect the heavens, the earth, and the underworld together in a way. Also, the great height of mountains and pyramids would grant them sacredness as well, as you are literally ascending up and trying to gain closer access to God or the gods and stuff that they are trying to draw closer to. And in some instances, the mountains and pyramids are seen as the homes of gods. For instance, Mount Olympus, right, for the Greeks was seen as the home of all the Greek gods. And Mount Fuji is a sacred, mountain as well, a volcano there in Japan. A lot of the Mayan pyramids and stuff had temples on top of them for a lot of their gods where they took care of them. The ziggurats, same thing. They had temples on top for the gods as well. So give them a connection to their gods and to ancestors as well. A lot of mountains to the Native Americans, such as the San Francisco, were sacred to them because the Hopi believed that it connected them to their ancestors. Mountains were also seen as a source of power, whether it's religious or political. Mountains and pyramids would grant a person or a deity more power. So you get divine and natural power coming from there as well. They could also be sources for rainwater and other features as well. Volcanoes end up being a good fit there because of the rumblings and the lava and all the show that you get from an exploding volcano. And you also end up getting a lot of what are known as hierophanies. And these are basically where things occur that appear to be supernatural. For instance, if you have a mountain peak, like you see this one here, and the sun ends up rising perfectly in alignment with that mountain peak, and you worship the sun, do you think that that mountain might end up being sacred to you a little bit because the sun has chosen that mountain in a way? And that's the way some of these things got. They call that a hierophany, where they see the supernatural in some of the things that are going on around them. And through these constructed pyramids, they actually were able to manifest some of these hierophanies as well in what we call skyscape archaeology or landscape archaeology, where they line certain things up with the planets or the moon and sun, or even things within the landscape to make them appear that they are similar or the same. So again, you got all sorts of different things that could end up bringing in sacredness to these mountains or these constructed mountains known as pyramids. Now again, pyramids were also seen as mountains by those who built them. Many of the ziggurats, if you look at their cuneiform names, actually have house, mountain, something or another. So usually there's a mountain house, mountain home of the heavens, mountain house of the gods. Some along those lines, you end up seeing the name mountain being used within the name of that ziggurat. In the Mayan, they called their pyramids wits, which translates into mountains. Even the Egyptians have a little bit of a tale that their pyramids were actually pulled up and created out of mountains and everything. So they have a connection to mountains there at the pyramids of Giza as well. So again, why are mountains sacred? Why would people think of a mountain to be sacred in general? We've kind of talked about a lot of those things, but from a biblical perspective, why would people consider a mountain to really be sacred? Bingo. See, as I've been doing my research on all these things, things have been tying in as I've been going, and it took me a little bit longer to figure that out than I'd like to admit, but I'm glad you got caught on that one. So again, I firmly believe that it all stems back to the flood of Noah, where Noah, the ark landed in the mountains of Ararat. And so when you land on that mountain, once everything came out, they all descended the mountain and went to live. And it would not take long, I'd imagine, for people, especially Nimrod, who's trying to, trick them and to get them to follow him instead of God, to go, hey, guess what? We came from the mountains. The mountains are sacred. Let's build a mountain here. We're in a flat land. We need to build a mountain, and this is going to be our sacred place for everybody. And so I believe that it really stems back to the mountain where they came off the ark, and why mountains play such an important role in a lot of cultures' significance and religion. So again, leftover memory from all that. So the idea of constructed pyramids and constructed mountains was actually a part of my master's dissertation that I did, and a comparison of two cultures of what I tried to do to kind of show some of these things. And I had to keep a lot of my Bible references and ideas out of it, but the basic underlying research was for the same purpose here. So I compared a couple of case studies. I compared the Ziggurat of Ur with the Pyramid of the Moon at Teotihuacan in Mexico. So, and I actually got to go to Teotihuacan, and that was a pretty interesting experience there. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go to Iraq and go see the Ziggurat of Ur. I would have loved to, but too much money and too dangerous. All right. So the reason why I chose these two case studies is because they're separated by roughly 2,000 years, pretty much. By the time that Teotihuacan began to exist and be built as a city and everything, Ur was pretty much wiped out and very, very last leg, pretty much died. No one inhabited the city by the time Teotihuacan came in. So both heights are separated by almost 2,000 years. And also they are on opposite sides of the globe. They are completely separated from each other in two different parts of the world. If you want to compare stuff, if you want to try to show that there's a commonality between them, and then finding the things that are almost impossible to have these or should not have these will be your best bet to show that there is some, hopefully, sort of connection there. So again, they both also were dedicated to each culture's moon deity. So I also made sure that the pyramid structures I looked at were to the same deity. They both went to the moon deity, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And also, by secular standards, again, these two cultures should not have any chances of intersection, and again, which should make the similarities between them rare. They've never had any chance to cross over based off of secular reasoning. Now, what I found was actually pretty interesting and pretty staggering, to say the least. Now, of course, there are unique features between these two things. The materials that were used in the Ziggurat of Ur in Mesopotamia, they used mud bricks that they fired to build it because that's the building materials they had. But in Teotihuacan, they had a bunch of mountains around them, and they basically carved out stones of basalt and other igneous rocks. But they also had different geographies. Again, Ur was a floodplain. It was flat, no mountains for miles away, while Teotihuacan was around mountains, had 3 prominent mountains around it. So again, there are differences, and that is just based off of your geography and materials you have, and also what you see around you in nature as well would justify those differences. But the similarities are far more interesting. And one thing I need to point out is that we're looking for intent over action. What were the intentions of the people building these things instead of just the actions? Because intent is always more important than what you do 9 times out of 10. And especially when we're looking at the past. Why did they build this? What was the purpose behind it? Why did they do it this way? So again, we're looking at intent over the action of the building. And we're looking at a similar design and a similar purpose for them. So the common things that we found, or that I discovered as I did my research for this, is that both had some type of commemoration of their structure. For the Ziggurat of Ur, you had foundation cylinders. Some were put in by Ur-Nammu, who was the first builder of, well, actually the second builder of the Ziggurat, but the first big building of the Ziggurat. And Nabonidus. We found Nabonidus' foundation cylinders. There's a picture of one there. And he mentions Ur-Nammu and his construction. In the Pyramid of the Moon, we end up seeing a lot of human and animal burials, human sacrifice, animal sacrifice, as well as other ritualistic objects. In the ziggurat, they actually found small copper crescent moons and even a canoe boat that all represent the god Nana, the moon god. And within the Pyramid of the Moon, they found animals like the jaguar and other things that, again, represent the moon. So while they did have different types of deposits, these were actually in there to commemorate the structures. And for it gave the king power and credence and hopefully favor with Nana. And in Teotihuacan, it was hopefully to appease the moon god, who is also a god of water, to make sure to bring forth water from the mountain for them. So these were done to invoke, but also to commemorate these structures. Now, the designs are also very similar to each other. Both of them were stepped pyramids. Both of them had a stepped pyramid featured to them. And as you see, the Ziggurat of Ur, that's the artist's reconstruction of what it would have looked like based off of Leonard Woolley's excavations in the 1920s. And the Pyramid of the Moon at Teotihuacan, it's a computer reimagining of it, of what it possibly looked like as well. But if you notice the structures themselves, they have that stair-step appearance to them. They both also had central staircases, even though the ziggurat had 3 staircases, a central one and 2 wings that formed up to the middle, and then you went up a central staircase to the temple. But Teotihuacan had a central staircase. They both had kind of a porch or kind of a gatekeeper section, the abascada on the Pyramid of the Moon. You kind of see it there in the front. Actually kind of like a porch or a platform for the priests. And if you kind of look very closely at the Ziggurat of Ur there, you'll see the kind of a gold arch thing right there at the bottom of the first, or the top of the first tier. And that actually kind of is the same thing, where the priests could do a few more rituals before going up to ascend the top. They both had temples at the top. They both used color to beautify and add a layer of divine power to the structures. Each of the colors on the ziggurats actually lined up with various planets. And I didn't write these down, but I know blue represented Venus, gold was the sun, silver was supposed to represent the moon, I believe red was Mars, I think black or gray was Jupiter. So they ended up using all these different colors and stuff to signify the various planets in the ziggurats, and that gave an extra layer of divinity to those. Now, Ziggurat of Ur didn't have that many colors because it wasn't that tall. It wasn't 7 stories tall under Ur-Nammu. But in Teotihuacan, they use that red color there, and that's found literally all over the place. And when I went down there, you saw that red literally everywhere. It just wasn't on the pyramids anymore because they've been destroyed and damaged so heavily that a lot of that was gone. But it's firmly believed by archaeologists they did have that red color, and that was the divine significance of them. Just what we're still trying to figure out. It's also interesting that both of these structures are actually rectangular and not square. The Ziggurat of Ur is 62.5 meters by 43 meters. The Pyramid of the Moon is 168 meters by 149 meters. I got curious, though. I was wondering if the proportions are actually the same. And come to find out, the Pyramid of the Moon actually has an increase of both dimensions by 106 meters, with just being a half a meter off on the one. So they have exactly the same proportions as far as the base goes, but the Moon Pyramid, of course, is just bigger than the ziggurat was. Both were important enough to undergo reconstructions in ancient times. Again, the Ziggurat of Ur, after Ur-Nammu died, his son finished building it, and then it got destroyed in a battle. Then Nabonidus, the son of Nebuchadnezzar, came in and rebuilt it, and he was going to design it up to a 7-story ziggurat. That was the ideal for the Neo-Babylonians. The Pyramid of the Moon, there's 7 building phases for it, and it was rebuilt as well, not through deconstruction or attack, but because of gaining political power. But they were both very important and deserve to be rebuilt according to those societies. The height of both structures drew people from each culture to the sacred. Again, with the ziggurat being on a plain, it didn't really have to be that tall to be seen for miles away. In fact, it was only roughly about 30 meters tall. But again, if you're on flatland, and I come from flatland, you can get on top of an overpass and you can see for about 10 miles. All right, we are flat. Around here, y'all got hills. All right, we don't know how to take that sometimes. But again, you can see one of these things from literally miles and miles away on that flat land. So again, it doesn't have to be super, super tall by our standards. The Pyramid of the Moon is roughly standing today about 43 meters. It might have been taller, but we don't know because we don't have the whole thing. We only got what we have of it. So again, so they both had a height to them. And the Pyramid of the Moon, and the Pyramid of the Sun was actually almost 90 meters. It is the tallest pyramid in North America. And which is pretty cool. I was wanting to go up them, but they had them both shut off. You couldn't go. So I was kind of mad because I went all that way to go up the mountain, especially the Pyramid of the Moon, and couldn't go up it. And I was like, darn it. But anyway, but these two pyramids in Teotihuacan actually connected with the three mountains, and 5 was kind of sacred to the Teotihuacanos. And so that actually gave an extra layer of sacredness to them there. So both structures link the people to the heavens and to the underworld. Underneath the Pyramid of the Moon, they've done scans where they believe there may be a natural cave underneath the Pyramid of the Moon. They haven't dug for it yet, but they believe there might be a natural cave. Under the Pyramid of the Sun we just talked about, and also another pyramid called the Pyramid of the Feathered Serpent there at Teotihuacan, they have man-made caves underneath them. Why do they do that? Because caves for Central America and Mayan people were links to the underworld. But if the Pyramid of the Moon has a natural cave under it, then that would give that more significance because it came from nature. It was directly connected, not man-made connected to the underworld. And the ziggurat would be connected to the underworld because Nana, when the moon goes down, the people of Ur and the Mesopotamians thought that Nana went to the underworld during the daytime. And so again, it draws in that connection between the heavens and the underworld at both of these places. So they both were considered recreations of the universe. Again, they built the pyramid or the ziggurat of Ur to honor Nana and his part in creation, which was minimal, but he did play a role there. Him and his wife Nagal were supposedly gave birth to the sun and to Venus. And Teotihuacan by the Aztecs was seen as the city where the new creation of life came after. This is supposed to be the 5th world according to the Aztecs, because the last one was destroyed by a lot of water called a flood. And the Aztecs believed Teotihuacan was where the new world began its creation, that the gods ended up creating that there, even though it was people that made it. The Aztecs came in about 500 years after the Teotihuacan went out. Both are also considered a source of power. The ziggurat of Ur gave power to the king, and Nana, the moon god, gave power to the city. The Pyramid of the Moon at Teotihuacan, the ritual deposit, gave the leaders the right to rule. Teotihuacan did not have a king. They had more of an oligarchy, a small number of people that were ruling over them, and also provided continued blessing of water. Both of them also function as homes for their respective deities. Again, the ziggurat of Ur, the moon god Nana, and his wife Nagal. Again, so he is the moon god, he is male, and he is associated with fertility, with light. Let me get my papers here, right? With the underworld, with water, with bulls. Even had a sacred number. Anybody want to know what that number was? How many days are in a month on average? 30. Why would 30 be important? Because it's associated with the moon. They used lunar calendars back then. So 30 would be the number that Nana would be associated with, Nana, the moon god. And so that ends up bringing a little bit of sacredness to that number as well. And here you can see a relief of Nana there. Now, I'm going to butcher this name for the goddess of the Pyramid of the Moon, because it is Aztec, and I don't speak Aztec very well. And it's too many consonants, not enough vowels, kind of like the Norse. So the Pyramid of the Moon had Chalchiniku, something along those lines. Again, it's a tongueful, but it basically turns into the water goddess or jade skirt goddess is what it would translate into. And she is considered to be a moon goddess, although a lot of people say, well, the Aztecs gave it the name of the Pyramid of the Moon, so it really doesn't have a connection to the moon. But if you look at the Central American cultures, almost all of their religions overlap to a big degree. While there's certain minor differences, the overall themes are the same. And the themes of the moon god or the water goddess here that we see coincide with the moon deities found in southern parts of Central America. Because she's associated with fertility, water, jaguars, conch shells, the underworld. And guess what? The moon deities of the Maya and other areas of Central America, the moon deities associated with all those things. Even though there's no moon imagery in Teotihuacan, it's safe to assume with the fact that you find these jaguars on these reliefs, conch shells there as well. You have water and fertility, all these different themes all there, that of course it would be associated with the moon also, since there is a known overlap of those religious beliefs within Mesoamerican cultures. Now, another interesting thing with these two is that they both had constructed hierophanies. Remember, hierophany is some way of bringing nature into a sacred thing, right? There's some type of way of showing that this is sacred. So the Ziggurat of Ur, when they constructed it, that central staircase was actually constructed to where the northern lunar landstill will actually shine light and follow the path up that staircase into the temple. Now, lunar standstill only happens every 18.6 years. We just had one last year. Last year was the period of time where we were having the major standstills. And so a lot of talk was done with those about this and measurements, and it lined up perfectly over there in Iraq for that major standstill, just as it was predicted it would. So what did they do? They actually knew to build that to where when the moon reaches its farthest point northward, it would shine straight up the staircase into the temple, giving more power and honor to their moon god. In Teotihuacan, they end up having the moon pyramid represented by Cerro Gordo. Cerro Gordo is that big mountain you see behind the pyramid. It's the biggest mountain there. And that's where the water would run off after the rains and everything, come and water the area. And this is more landscape archaeology instead of skyscape. But when you walk down the Avenue of the Dead, and I actually walked this and kept my eyes forward on the pyramid and the mountain just to kind of put myself in their shoes. And as you walk along what they call the Avenue of the Dead, down and up 5 times. Remember, 5 is the sacred number for Teotihuacan. Everything you get closer, the closer you get that pyramid, the more that pyramid takes the place of the mountain. And eventually, once you walk into the Plaza of the Moon, it is said to have become the mountain. And so they end up giving it that kind of sacredness there as well. Now, I said all that to say this, that pyramids all over the world, not just pyramids, but megalithic sites, Native American mounds, again, megalithic sites like Stonehenge and stuff, they all end up being lined up with various astronomical effects. The pyramids of Giza are lined up with Orion's belt. There's even evidence that a lot of the pyramids down further south that they call the starter pyramids, or first attempts to build pyramids, are lined up with various stars as well. Göbekli Tepe, I can't ever pronounce the name right 100%, in Turkey is an ancient site. It's actually lined up with the red star Sirius. And Stonehenge is lined up with a lot of the equinoxes and solstices of the sun and the moon. Native American mounds and stuff end up being lined up with the sun and moon as well. Why do all these places have these alignments and stuff? Where does it all trace back to? Again, I believe it all goes back to Nimrod and the Tower of Babel. And we find that within, again, God's Word. where all this was spread out and brought forth. As they spread, they took these ideas with them. They adjusted them based off of the areas they were, but they kept the basic same premise, that they're going to build these mountains, these centers. They're going to connect the underworld and the heavens together to where they can become more powerful and they can be pleased by the gods that they have created in their own mind, and where they can end up having some type of power and strength there. So, again, I still got a lot more research to do. I also believe that a lot of the deities from around the world are connected as well. Did you know that every religion on the planet, no matter what religion it is, has a creator God? But that creator God is not the God that any of them worship. They don't worship that creator God. They worship a lower tier God. And a lot of them, they'll only call upon that creator God if it's extremely, extremely, extremely bad times. They know that Jehovah God exists, Almighty, Most High God, He's there, but they ignore Him. And they'd rather worship these lower gods, which I believe are devils, and Satan, and themselves. They'd rather worship that, and to their own demise. But it is interesting how they all have this concept that there is a creator God out there. Well, how do they all have this concept of a creator God that no one worships? So we worship these lesser gods. Again, back to Babel. Babel connects all our history. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and we are Boot Hill Bible Ministries. There's our website there. Check out our website, guys. We have a lot on there, answer a lot of questions. A lot of my wife's devotion, a lot of my wife's devotionals are on there as well under Callie's Corner. And also, if you'd like to invite us to your church or area for a seminar, then fill out the form and let me know what you want. We got plenty of options there. We're also on Facebook, and again, hopefully coming soon to YouTube pretty soon. So thank y'all. Thank you, Dr. Hoban, for having us, and God bless y'all.
Yeah, very interesting, brother. It's amazing how much money and effort people put into false religion, like this crazy evolution religion. How much money do they put into trying to prove that? How much research trying to find a bone of some ancestor? I love making fun of them. Evolution is the dumbest religion in the world. Thank you, brother. Appreciate that. Okay, 7 o'clock tonight, I have a last session for boot camp. For those watching this program, please come visit our Dinosaur Adventureland. It's free. What else you want? We'll feed you, house you, give you the tours, and want us to pay you? No, just come for free. All right, see you tomorrow. Bye.